Welcome to the Porsche Club Insider, your one stop for all things Porsche and PCA. Here's your host, Vu Nguyen, and the Insider crew.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 122. If our surroundings look familiar, you probably watched episode 118.
You gave it away because I think we're far enough away they won't recognize you. Well, do you know what they recognize? It's a table.
Well, yeah,
Because
this is much nicer than our
we
normal.
We had the
guy.
small table.
Yeah.
You ever heard of the Tiny Desk concert? This is the Tiny Desk
Tiny
podcast.
We're living this life of luxury right now.
Yeah,
We're
we
trying
are.
to take it
Yeah.
all
I
in.
don't know what to do.
Of course, we have Manny and Damon at the table. Our guests for today, President of Hagerty Marketplace and Radius, Ken Ahn. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's just kick it off. You're a Porsche guy. I know you're a Porsche guy because when we were talking about this interview earlier, like, what are we going to talk about? I'm just like, Ken's got Porsche DNA, Porsche blood.
Yeah, and when you said if we could do this podcast, I thought, oh, this is great.
It's going to
love
be
Porsches.
easy.
I'll tell you a little bit about how I fell in love with Porsche because everyone's got that moment.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So I came to the U.S. in '92 in middle school, and shortly thereafter, the Bad Boys movie came out.
Yeah, there you go.
Back in those days where you had a big speaker connected to your VCR,
Yeah.
and when this 964 stops as there's Martin Norris and those guys are arguing, and you see this ABS brake kicks in and it stops, and I think I rewound and watched that scene maybe 15 times, and that's when I kind of opened my eyes to Porsche. Coming from Korea, that's where I was born and raised. You really don't see Porsches. From that point on, I was just obsessed. So started there. So that was 9th grade, I think, or 10th grade. 993s came out, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. And from that point on, Porsche has always been sort of a dream car for me. And now I'm fortunate enough to own a couple. Yeah.
No, I see you at a lot of events. Obviously, when I go to the auctions and stuff, I see you there. But that wasn't always the case for you. It's fairly recent that you're kind of in this scene.
Yeah, I think I'm very fortunate. I mentioned to you I grew up in Korea, but I was really into cars since I was a little kid. As far as I can remember, my dad used to travel abroad, and he would bring these Matchbox cars back to Korea. And back then there's only handful of brands and handful of models in Korea. So, you see all these varieties, different colors. What is this? Z28. What is this? How do you read this thing? Mercedes.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
I learned a lot about cars. And I was just infatuated with cars since I was a kid. I never thought my passion for cars and my career would intersect.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Welcome to the club.
We're all
right?
very
Yeah.
lucky here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're all very fortunate.
When I was an undergrad, playing Division I AA football, and I'm the only football player in the library on Friday looking at all the new car magazines.
I didn't know that factoid. Football?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a different story.
Division 1 is the highest level, by the way.
No, double A.
Oh, double A. Double A.
And then, I started my career. I wanted to be in business, so I started my career as a management consultant. Went back to business school for my MBA. And then I worked at Wall Street. I was an investment banker.
Can I boast a little bit? As any Asian relative would be, is like, you went to Harvard, my friend.
Yeah.
Not just any school.
Anyway.
And I brought down the average by not going to Harvard.
No, and I did investment banking. My goal was to do it for 2-3 years, learn about finance, capital markets, how do you value companies, and then get a real job. And I joined in 2007 out of business school. 2008, 2009, as most listeners will remember, were very tough times.
Sure.
At that point, you're not
Oh, yeah.
leaving, you're not going anywhere. You're
Yeah.
hoping to stay. Momentum kept me, and it was fun. I learned a lot for 7 years, and came time where I decided that now I don't want to be a career banker. I'm about to become a managing director, and now I want to try to pursue sort of more operational role. Serendipitously, a person I worked with at Goldman was the CFO at Sotheby's. I ended up becoming a member of Sotheby's as an auction house. Didn't know anything about art or auctions for that matter. That led into Sotheby's investing into a car auction business called RM, as many of you know as
absolutely.
RM Sotheby's. And fast forward a couple of years from there, I ended up going to RM Sotheby's and served as president for 5 years there. And that's when I first realized, wow, this industry exists. There's an industry it's a small industry from when you think about broader industries, but within the, sort of the hobby, it's actually sizable, and felt like there was a real business opportunity. But also, it's a lot easier and a lot more interesting when the subject matter that you're dealing with is cars. And now I'm totally fortunate to be with Hagerty. My primary responsibility is driving what we call our marketplace business. So we have two businesses, Broad Arrow, which some of the listeners might know. It's more of a traditional live auction private sales business. And then Hagerty Marketplace online. So that's a little bit my intro, and I know that was a long-winded way of answering it, but being surrounded by colleagues who love cars at a company that is all about cars, and then working with clients and folks like you guys and talking to people about cars, and we're
living
here,
the dream.
We're here at a car event.
Yeah,
right?
we're at a car event.
So this is something that I think that's why I was saying I was very fortunate, because now I get to combine the business side and the car.
So along that career path and school and such, and I know you love cars as a kid, but when did the opportunity of acquiring cars kind of kick in?
A lot later than I would have hoped.
Yeah, yeah.
When I was in finance and working in Manhattan, even just having a car is a challenge.
Right.
So I'll say two things. One, my first sort of collector car, or car that wasn't meant to be daily driven, was a Porsche 911, and it was from
details.
Yeah, we'll come back to in a minute. But there is a caveat. The true collector car that I bought, not because I've always dreamed about it, because there's a sentimental value, is actually my father passed away when I was 24 years old, and 27 years old, and the last family sedan that we drove together that I helped him sell before I went to go work. Was for those listeners who follow Mercedes, it's W124 chassis.
Oh,
it's
124,
E320 sedan.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is the most successful platform Mercedes had sort of made in terms of volume, which means it has the least amount of collectability, right?
Yeah.
But that actually, when my son was born, I thought, being a car guy, I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have our family's old car and the car that my dad used to drive? And back then, when I sold it, it was on Seattle Times Classifieds, and it wasn't an email address or anything. It was just a phone number. So, but I remember the gentleman's name. His name was Ron Goodfellow, and this is probably, 6, 7, 8 years later. I try to Google and try to call the Ron, Goodfellows in Seattle area, and found a guy. And,
Really?
it just so turned out that he was about to trade that car in for a Ford F-150.
Wow.
So I was on a business trip, and I went there right from Edmonton straight to Seattle, and I bought the car. So that's probably the car that I would sell as my last car, but that's with us. And it was a whopping $2,500, but to me it's worth a lot more than that. So that was the first car I bought, which is the Mercedes, and that's the last car I'll part ways. And the first Porsche, the real sort of enthusiast car that I bought, was a 991.1 Carrera 2S. And there's a even more sort of story behind it, not to bore you guys. Cut me off if you want.
No,
I'm not boring at all.
So when I was an associate, working till 3, 4 a.m. every day on Wall Street, the vice president, and he's still a dear friend, and I keep in touch with him. He had a 997.1 Carrera 2S, and I remember just seeing his key on the desk, and I remember just looking at, you have a Porsche, and talking to, can I see your car? Riding in it, and then fast forward, maybe I was like 3rd or 4th year associate. He said, "Hey Kenny, there's a new Porsche that's coming out." It turned out it was 991. I'm going to buy that and trade this in. Whatever the dealers offer, you can have it. And I thought, man, that's the car I really wanted. Yep. And I said, it's a big purchase for me. I don't know if I can afford it. I don't know where I'm going to park it. But he said, no, just drive it for a month. I don't care, 2 weeks. And if you like it, pay me later. Like 0% financing.
Super cool.
Nice.
Really nice. So I said yes, and I brought it home. And I actually wasn't very proficient in driving a manual either. I only did it.
Learn it on a friend's car. That's perfect.
That's a good car.
That's a good car. to learn on.
If he's listening, he's gonna.
Does he know about this yet? No.
Wait a minute. Ken said he was very good at driving a manual.
He was trading it in.
Oh, there we go.
By the way, I learned how to drive a stick in a Boxster in business school when my friend leased that. Anyway, so lots of Porsche ties. Brought it home, and my wife sort of looked at me and said, "Are you nuts? We just have a newborn. We don't have place to park. It's a manual car, and we can't put,
So
I'm a
sensible.
big guy. We can't really put a thing behind it." And it was really sad, but I had to drive it back and told them, like,
I thought it was gonna have a happy ending
yeah,
story.
no, I could. I said I just
No,
can't.
but it planted the seed though.
Yeah,
So
I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And fast forward a few more years, he said, "Hey, I'm going to sell my 991, the one that he bought."
Yeah,
Same guy.
And I got in that 911, I think either the day or the day. No, first he got it at dealership one evening, brought it to work the next day, and I hopped into that car in the passenger seat. So, car had maybe 30 miles on it.
Yeah.
So I was kind of there with the new car. So when he decided to sell that, I had to get it. So that I ended up purchasing it probably around 2015, 2016. So that puts me, probably close to 40 years old when I got it, but I was able to afford one. So
Yeah.
that's how I got into Porsches.
And we'll get into it later in terms of the number of Porsches you have, because you've more than I think made up for starting a little bit later than some of us.
Yeah.
This is gonna be an interesting one. We got an email earlier today as we were driving up. A gentleman was interested in knowing whether or not, I think he was 6'1", and he was
6'3", you said.
Oh, 6'3"?
Yeah.
6'3", and he was wondering if he could fit into a Boxster. And since I have you here, you're 6'4"?
6'4", 6'4.5" on a good day.
And would you share with our listeners, you've tried G-body cars, 993s, 991s.
Yeah.
What's the recommendation?
So for me, I guess in going by level of comfort,
Yeah.
and I have not been in a 992, so 991 is very comfortable for me. There's some times where I actually have to move the seat up a little bit to adjust.
Welcome to my world.
997, very comfortable, so I've
Okay.
got no issues there. I'm not only tall, but I'm actually pretty big and wide. I do have one car that's got a bucket seat, and that is, one, it's really cool, but I cannot probably drive that for an hour because it's, it doesn't recline and you're kind of tied into it. It feels like you're racing, but you're not. And then 993s, I embarrassed to say, I've always been a big guy, but when I have more weight, 993s can be tighter. When I have less weight, it can be more comfortable. But
There's a perfect incentive for you.
that's a real incentive. But 993s, I think, are comfortable. I think when we get to the G bodies or 930s, that's when it gets a little bit harder for me. I think, especially when you try to shift, manual car, try to shift the gear and try to get into first gear, my leg gets jammed between the steering wheel and the gear.
You know why? Probably because the 993. Well, you said in 993 you can.
993 I can.
So that's interesting because it's the same wheelbase
It is.
as the G body. So you would think it would
I don't
be
know if it's a shifter
But
length.
where the shifter is, the
Yeah.
location is.
Yeah.
maybe that's where.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's very interesting.
Yeah.
I thought
993, for all intents and purposes, is not, living room couch and comfortable,
But doable.
but I can totally
Yeah.
drive 3-4 hours without a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. There's the
There's the
answer to your question. I'm sure the person that submitted the question, they
Hopefully you're listening, right?
Yeah, hopefully you're listening, and
Well, at least you
there's
can
your
lose
answer.
weight. I can't get taller.
Oh, one thing I will say though, and you see this in forums, and I had two colleagues who were same height, and one was saying, I could fit in my Alpha GTV 2000 no problem, and the other person says, no way, I can't fit in there. My head rubs against the roof, and we were having this intense discussion, and I said, you guys can't be the same height, and they both got up,
Yeah.
and they're same height.
Proportion though.
But when they sat down, the
Torso,
height difference
yeah.
was like this.
Yes.
So I think it's actually
Yeah.
the length of your legs versus torso that also changes quite a bit with
Yeah.
respect to
You
cars.
remember that Ford GT? Were you there when the gentleman brought the Ford GT to the autocross? He was super nice and let everybody sat into it. I was very excited to be able to sit into a Ford GT, and people were sitting in it, and I'm like, cool, let me give it a try. I'm very sad to say, because of my long torso, the top of a Ford GT door lops off the top of my head.
Oh wow!
I
Is
can't.
there pictures of this?
I was so
So what are you,
disappointed.
5'10" ish?
I'm 5'10" on a good day, and
So
I
I'm
can't.
5'. So
but
I was
you-
about to say we're lucky, but I guess it just
Yeah.
depends, right?
At least
Yeah.
you can get
Yeah.
in with the door
5'10"?
open.
Are
Oh
you
yeah.
5'10"?
Yes.
Is that
fine.
your Tinder profile 5'10" or?
Moving on. Let's see. On the move, with regards to online auctions, auctions on, in person, Broad Arrow. Tell us a little bit how that scene has been so dynamic in the past couple of years, and how you're sort of leading that charge for Hagerty.
Yeah. First of all, the market is very dynamic, as you've noted, and changed quite a bit over the last, 5 years. And that's actually what makes our jobs more interesting. COVID really changed a lot of things.
Yeah.
At the time, I was at RM and we were running live auctions primarily. I'd like to say we had the foresight to say that we got to start moving into digital. But at the time, we saw smaller, players that are starting to get bigger, and we thought, hey, let's do online as well. So we were building a platform that I would say was sort of a beta stage, because we started right in 2019 internally, and 2020 March Amelia Island auction was literally the last auction.
Yep, we were there.
I remember driving back.
Yeah. And
We were so like, how do we handshake? Do we fist bump? Do we elbow? What do we do?
Yeah, some people
And then we got on the plane and went home, and that was all she wrote.
that was it. And it was fascinating, because we had another auction in Fort Lauderdale just a couple weeks down the road, and we thought at the time it wasn't officially shut down yet, and so we had to make a call. Are we going to do a live auction, or are we going to do an online auction, or would that online even work? Can we get it ready?
Yeah.
And long story short is we made the call to say, let's go online, because the way Europe's happening and everything's happening, it's going to be really risky for us to execute a live auction and nobody shows up. And that's kind of how we pivoted to online. And from that point on, for some period of time, live just didn't exist. And so I think what the gradual shift all of a sudden got accelerated in a structural way. And at the time, I remember speaking with some of the journalists and industry participants saying, hey, is live auction dead now? And is online going to be however the world works? At the time, I remember saying, I don't think live goes away, but I do think online is here to stay. And it sounds easy to say now, hindsight 2020, but at the time, you think about live auctions, it's very different. So both are transactional, but you guys go to Amelia or Pebble or other places, it's a social gathering.
Absolutely.
And a place to gather with other car lovers, to interact, see, obviously with cars in the background and transacting, usually attached to a concourse. So it's a real gathering. And so it's beyond just a transaction. That's something that live event provides. Whereas online has its own online community in many cases, but it's a little bit more transactional, and it's less of a event that everyone's getting excited to go about. It's at the privacy and comfort of your home or your desk that you're looking at things. So I think having both is great for car lovers. You have options to do both. I do think there are some situations where live is better than online, or vice versa. One example would be really old classic cars, no 17-digit VINs, high value, authenticity, restoration quality could matter. Whereas if it's a 2-year-old car with a clean Carfax, paint metered, in photos, it's a very different piece of mind, and the transaction values are different. And so what we've seen, and naturally so, is more higher value cars, more classics, more sort of hard to find cars tend to be more on the live auction side, and more 6, 7, 8-figure cars even. And whereas online tends to be more 5-figure cars and 6-figure cars, and occasionally 7-figure cars. So you do see some differences. The beauty of online is that it's immensely scalable and hugely accessible. Dissemination of information is super easy. It's reduced a lot of friction costs. And so, when I thought about this long and hard, and joining Hagerty and thinking about this, and based on the experience I've had, it was pretty clear to me that, hey, they're actually two fundamentally different businesses. And while there's overlaps in people that are transacting on both, the Venn diagram isn't as big as you might think. So there's two different sort of groups of segments. And it seemed daunting because we were just starting a business, but you might as well dream big.
Right.
And generally, you'll see most companies are focused on one or the other, and it's very difficult to sort of do both. And we thought, you know what, let's dream big. And you know, Hagerty's got the reach and the audience, but let's make sure that they're branded differently, experiences differently, expectations are different. And that led us to, you know, obviously, and I started this company with my co-founders, Broad Arrow, which started as live auction business. When we started, you know, talking to Hagerty and ultimately partnering and you know, becoming part of Hagerty, the same team had this strategic discussion and question, and we said, with Hagerty, let's create the marketplace that's scalable, reachable, trusted, online, and then let's continue to use the Broad Arrow for live auctions and private sales of high value and financing. So that's kind of how we differentiated the two.
Does the average age of a buyer or seller vary between your online and your live auction?
Yeah, there's always dangers of average because it could be a huge variance. But yes, I think it's at least a decade, if not more. So
Which way?
So live auctions are older. We also look at it from a dollar weight perspective because we think about it commercially, like, you know, how much big dollars are changing. When you look at it on a dollar weight basis, live auctions are typically around high 60s to low 70s, depending on the sale. Online is somewhere going to be in the 50s or low 60s, depending on the time period and the companies you measure. So you are looking at a demographic difference of at least a decade, if not more.
What I see, it looks like putting on the margin compared to a margin on a live auction compared to an online auction. Online auction, you seem to have very little overhead.
Yeah.
Compared to when, I mean, you pull all the stops out when you guys do the Broad Arrow auction. It's a beautiful, like the Ritz-Carlton.
Yeah.
You have this ballroom. You have drinks. It's you know, obviously very well done, and you're there for several days.
Yeah.
So in my head, I'm thinking that all adds up to the cost.
It sure does, and we feel it. That's also another reason why the business models are kind of bifurcating between higher value live versus online lower value. Because just to give round numbers, to put a show like that together at Amelia or Pebble, it's well into 7 figures to just execute the auction. Rough numbers, if you have 100 cars that you're offering, that means it's costing you $10,000 a car to hold the event.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
So then you have to do the math and think about the margin.
Sure.
And it tells you that the average value has to be above 100,000 to break even. But if you want to try to make, you know, more than just your cost, then you're going to have mid 6 figure average to make the numbers. With that kind of curse and a blessing at the same time. Being a former banker, I got to think about you know, P&L. Whereas online,
kind of important.
Online, yes, you have platform, you have people working on it, you have, you know, photography, marketing, everything else, but the variable cost is so low. So that does make it a lot more easier. And in fact, you're better off as a business to think about scaling and having lower value cars there, because if you use that math that I gave you, that's on average. But that means for every car that we offer that's below 100,000, just using that example, we're losing money to sell that car at a live auction. Does that make sense? So, you know, it's a portfolio. We sometimes we know at a unit basis we're going to lose money, but we want to make sure that there's a
You're attracting this customer who might not be able to. Right.
So are they competing against each other, or do they work as a team? Because to me, it seems like the perfect scenario where I come to you with a certain car and you say, you know what, Manny, it may not be great for Broad Arrow, but it would be great for online. And we think you would do better with putting this online. This is the perfect car versus does Broad Arrow compete? People from Broad Arrow, are they competing against the online group?
Not really. I think there are some cases where it's sort of in that gray zone. Generally speaking, if there's lots of multiples and you know exactly what a 997.1 turbo coupe with 25,000 miles should trade at, then as a seller, you're better off going with a lower margin, lower commission business, which tends to be more online. And there's not a lot of variability. If it's a special paint to sample, you know, one-off, something that's got 16 miles on it, then, you know, arguably you could kind of go to both, but you'd say, hey, for live event at like Pebble or Amelia, likely to have an audience of, I guess, people who are willing to pay more for, on average, for a car, that may be the best advice. So you got to kind of think about what's the car and what's the situation. The other thing is timing. Online, there's a sale every day, but you know, Monterey right now in May, we don't have anything until for the next 3 months. So those things factor into giving advice. The one thing we do always stress is the relationships, right? If you're not transacting once, you're going to transact hopefully multiple times, buy or sell, and be their sort of trusted marketplace or an advisor, which means you can't give somebody an advice just based on my near-term profit. You got to think about, how do you make sure that we're giving the right advice with this customer?
They'll come back.
Yeah, and that's where I was going to get. Shout out to our buddy Ramsey Potts, who is the epitome of relationship.
Yep.
I know he has relationships with all sorts of collectors, and you're not looking at that one transaction. And you have the process of which, yes, you could post something online and you handle it, you take your own photos, but I've got to believe, especially the cars with the high value, those owners are saying, here's my jewel, you know how to take care of it and how best sell it, take it, do your thing, and they just stand back, right? And that's what you're offering them. And then to the buyer, when they know they're buying something from you all, it's been vetted, the experts look at, they look at the, whether or not it matches the certificate of, authenticity and all that kind of stuff. That's sometimes when you're going online, that stuff is not as concrete as one would think.
Yeah, and there are unfortunately some cases of either misrepresentation or overly enthusiastic.
That never happens in the car world.
No, never, right?
I've heard more of that happening, I feel like, lately, or maybe just I'm watching certain videos online where it just seems to be happening to these YouTubers a little more than maybe a year or two ago. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, history of commerce, every time there's big dollar to be made or quick buck to be made, there are likely to be some bad players, and I think some, it's mixed, but I would say by and large, you have good players participating in all sorts of different buying and selling activities. I think the online platforms have continued to evolve and become better, more efficient. Now they're giving you recommendations, alerts, all sorts of things. You bid on this one, you should look at that one. So I think there's really room for both, and I think that you're going to see more and more sort of bifurcate and sort of position differently in the market. In fact, the proof of that is live auction continues to grow, and online auction continues to grow. It's also interesting if you look at the total sales value of live versus online. Online used to be tiny, single digits, and it kept going up 10, 20, 30, 40, 50%. It's been 45, 55 sort of live online ratio for total sales for the last 3 years.
Wow.
So it's been kind of stable, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
That means both are growing.
Yeah. And we've also learned from Ramsey when he did his seminar on Treffin at Sea, our cruise program, he was talking about how much, you have online, you have in-person auction, but how much transaction there is just, owner to owner that you all bring them together.
Huge.
Yeah. So the world doesn't even see that transaction happen, but you guys are making that
and
connection.
Most of us don't even see it, right? Because the auction industry globally, if you look at all the online and live auctions last year, it's about $3 billion. It's a big number. But just to put things in perspective, Hagerty, as an insurance company, we know when an existing customer sells or buys a car. It's one of the first things you have to do. Yeah. Take it off your policy, otherwise you're paying, or you're adding. If just last year alone, that was 300,000 cars worth $14 billion.
That's incredible.
Just on
$14
billion just on Hagerty's insurance book, which means that's 4.5 times the entire auction industry, just based on what we can see. And we all know Hagerty, while it's growing and it's sort of well known, our market share of coverage of all the collector car universe is still very small. So you extrapolate that and you say, okay, the market is huge. What we're seeing in the public setting is just a very small portion of it. That makes sense when you think about all the classifieds, dealers, all the inventory that goes on AutoTrader, Cars.com, Hemmings, you name it. Those things are always trading. You just don't know how do you aggregate those data. Yeah. In addition to Joe down the street selling it to John, his neighbor, and
Or your
all that
buddy
stuff.
selling the car to you.
and
right?
Exactly. My
Yeah.
old boss sending it to me.
Yeah.
That's not being captured anywhere statistically. So I think it's huge, the private market.
So being in this industry, us included, and Manny gets these calls when it comes into headquarters, is people are always hoping we have a crystal ball. And they're wondering, so is now the bubble? Or was it last year? Is it still coming? Can I get that 993 turbo and be absolutely comfortable that 4 years from now that I'll get my money back if I have to?
So hard. I mean, there's more data in the stock market, right? Arguably.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, is the market going to go up or not? Are the rates going to go down or not? It's very similar. You can have a point of view. You can look at how the prices have changed over some period of time. You can look at supply, demand, all that stuff. Really hard to predict. And I think what I know from data over time is historically rare collectible last generation of this, manual that, air-cooled this, have, because of the limited supply, that if anything is dwindling as the cars are, more and more cars either get into accidents or other things and get off the road, and the desirability is there, those tend to go up. So secular trend has always been sort of high single digits for collector cars over long periods of time. It's kind of similar to the stock market over time, right? The near-term volatility is very, very difficult to say. Oftentimes, one of the challenges being in the auction business is, a couple of years ago at Monterey, we sold an F50 for world record price. Everyone should be cheering.
Yeah.
Now, everybody that we talk to for their F50 to sale is world record prices. And it's hard to tell whether the market was fully reset
Yeah.
or you just happen to have the right buyer and the right car at the right time. 1, 2, 3 data points, still not enough. Once you start seeing more patterns, it starts to change and the markets can reshift. But we try to look at that. We try to predict that. It's very difficult, even when we're in the business all day long.
We say in the club that we are very fortunate that we love and cherish a brand that, buy the car because you love it.
Yes.
Don't buy it because you're hoping to make 10, 20, 50% on it. But I have to say, you being a Porsche fan as well, we're lucky that the brand we love tends to do a pretty good job in holding value. And I think it transcends across all generations. I think back of the 70s Camaro jacked up in the back, big block, whatever. I don't know that is, appealing to all generations. But a 911 of that same era is more attractive.
We're probably biased on that.
We are, but our listeners are also biased.
No, Porsches are the best.
Our listeners are different makes the cars too.
Yeah.
So.
But you think about 911 from the very beginning till now, the generic sort of design motif and themes. I mean, my son and my wife actually think I have multiple of the exact same cars, even though it's 993 and 997. And
We know the difference.
because, it just looks like a Porsche.
Yeah.
And so I think there is something about consistency in design theme and the brand that Porsche has done. But I go back to what you said, Vu, which is hard to buy it just for investment. You got to be buying it because you really love the car or love driving it or love seeing it in your garage, right? There's got to be a different emotional aspect of it. Always helps when the value goes up, right?
Yeah.
One of the dangers of being in the industry and around cars and seeing, especially you, I see you up there up on the stage, and when there's a car that looks to be a good value, how do you keep yourself from not raising your hand and saying, I'll take that one home?
No comment.
Remember, this is recording on YouTube.
Remember that secret buyer that keeps popping up?
It might be used against you later.
Well, there's a couple things, and it's a very good question, and it's a kid in a candy store, right?
It is.
And the
We
candy
feel it. Yeah.
candy that you've always wanted is 30% off today.
Yeah.
So, but there are some things that from a business practice perspective. So, if it's a no reserve car, for example, and clients are bidding, we can only do what we call commission bidding. So, put up before the auction starts. Say, I'm going up to this amount, and it's in the book, and it's in the auctioneer's book. So there's no manipulation in the room or swooping in. And then for so there's some rules and regulations around it, but a lot of it's just also something doesn't sell or something sells really attractively that you said, hopefully the two things. Hopefully everyone else thinks that now that car is worth that much and I could find more.
Yeah.
Or, you try to go. I've even seen folks in the room. It's the craziest thing. You're bidding on it, Vu, and then Manny, you're sitting behind it, you're bidding on it, and then Vu wins. And then about 5 minutes later, Manny goes to Vu and says, would you sell that car to me at a profit? Like literally in the same auction room.
And within the same auction.
Same auction room.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's happened many, many times. And, some of this is because, you could say buyers, sell, whatever it is, bidder's remorse.
Bidder's remorse, yeah.
It's not buyer's remorse.
You have free alcohol too, right?
Yeah. I
Or,
should
or
have done
maybe
more.
that's a strategy
Yeah.
because they cut off the bidding
Yeah.
and know that they could just make an offer
That-
afterwards,
that
maybe?
could very
As
much
opposed
be
to
it.
instead of battling it out and knowing that's just going to escalate, let's just let them, I don't know.
That could be it. If there's only
I've
two
never
bidders,
been in that scenario. I'm just trying to rationalize here.
the risk there is the person who bought it says no.
Says no, exactly. So thank you very much. And I've said this before. You all were so, Ramsey, Ray, were so instrumental in finding a wonderful home for the PCA Classic Club Coupe. And at One Porsche Drive, I was only up there for 8 minutes. But it was the longest 8 minutes of my life wanting to make sure that we got the right price on the car. And I'm only worried about one car. You're worried about hundreds of cars with a much higher value. Do you take blood pressure medicine, or how do you get through that?
I vividly remember that, and first of all, I appreciate PCA entrusting us to offer that car at the PEC in Atlanta. As nervous as you were, we were too. Right?
Thank you for not telling me on that day.
Well, in 996, how could you know what it would do?
Yeah, but this car was
like
such
that.
a
Yeah.
recognizable,
Yeah.
well publicized, toured so many different events.
I think still holds the record for 996 and 997.
Yeah, and Broad Arrow was all but a year-old company. First, real relationship with PCA from that perspective too.
Yeah.
First time at Porsche, in the new company setting, there was a lot riding. So when you're the guy that's sort of leading that business, you're sitting there also sweating bullets. Not just that car, but any significant, any car pretty much. But especially the clients that you know best or personally, are friends with, or they decided, let's go no reserve. And when something's sitting at 60% no reserve and the auctioneer says any other bid, more often than not, the bids restart again, and then you're like, oof. But there are times where, we're just as, I think our team members, Ramsey, Ray, those guys, that they personally get vested into making sure that, their clients do well. Yeah. So we don't look like we're stressed, but we're all there. And it's not because, let's make more buyer's premium. It's not that one sale. It's the relationship going forward. So we always
and
I'm sure some clients are friends as well.
Oh yeah,
So,
most of them are actually.
So,
most of them,
100%. When we PCA have never sold a car in that fashion. Working together with Porsche, our relationship with Ray and Ramsey, and it was a new endeavor for you all. And then talking to our executive council, a sizable investment from PCA to build that car, a sizable investment from Porsche Cars AG as well as Porsche Cars North America. And then we said we're going to do it with no reserve. I was just, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how, I don't say it was a difficult
He
discussion.
acted the same way when he lost $5 at the blackjack table. You would have thought his mortgage went
I sweat when the dealer says, "Do you want to double down?" And that's only $10 more. And I had to talk to the executive council and I again, back to relationship. I fully believed you all had, our best of intentions and wanting a positive outcome for that, and we took it, and it turned out to be the best thing that we did.
So one thing I would say on that is, yes, we were nervous, but so is everybody involved. But it's one of those things that when I was an athlete or when I was studying and I was there's a longer personal story of how I got to the U.S. But long story short is I had a sort of long-standing thing with my father where if I get to a certain rank in this national standardized exam, then I can go to the U.S. And it's similar. It's like you don't know how the result's going to be, and you're always nervous. I'm very nervous in an exam, or I'm very nervous heading into the playoff game in football. And But you have to think about, okay, what do we do? What do we practice? Do we do our best? Do we take all the steps along the way?
Mm-hmm.
And then when the event comes, you are nervous, but you execute, right?
Yeah.
And you hope that the process and what we did along the way works. And more often than not, it does. 90% plus, I would say, is and so, yes, and being nervous is a good thing in a way, but you're not, sort of.
Broad Arrow was new, but
Yeah.
your track record was not, and that's what I conveyed over to our executive council. I say they know what they're doing. This is their world. I've got to believe, we're making the right decisions.
Yeah, I think we were fortunate to be a startup, but the founders and folks that not only had significant industry experience. I think the 11 of us combined, more than 100 something years of just classic car auction industry. But we also worked together very, very closely for many years. And so that made it a lot easier and a lot more comfortable in terms of how do we execute wearing a different jersey, basically.
Is that why Hagerty acquired Broad Arrow before they even had a first auction?
It
Was
was
because of the personnel?
funny. I think it was a week of the same auction where the closing happened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they haven't even had an auction yet.
Yeah. You could imagine the stress from my perspective trying to do the first auction and trying to get this deal done too at the same time. But that's a personal story. That's very good. I think the short answer is yes. So it was actually the team that gelled together, worked together really well, but have lots of experience. And one thing I learned in this business is that it's easy to start a business. It's very difficult to execute it well, and a lot of that is experience-based. Conceptually, it seems easy to do. Back when I was at Sotheby's, one of the reasons why we ended up investing in a company and looking at that is classic. Do you want to build, buy, or partner? Because the build thing is very difficult because when the specialists that you mentioned like Ramsey or Ray or others, but it's all relationships that are built over many, many years. We have Donnie Gould, who's been in this industry for better part of 4+ decades, right? Clients really trust him, and that doesn't get built overnight. And so those types of relationships is what personal relationships is what really makes this business work well. I think obviously McKeel and Hagerty team saw that this team was a new team, but experienced team that had lots of good relationship and knew how this business worked. And so that's what accelerated that.
Is that how most, I look at you got the upcoming Monterey auctions.
Yeah.
And you get also nervous that you're going to have enough cars to auction off because you have somewhat of a crowded market there.
Yeah.
There are several auction houses, and you look at them, you say, well, they're all auctioning. What's the difference between one and the other?
Yeah.
And is that mainly because of your personnel and the relationships they have? Or how many times are they cold calling, if you will, people with cars to try to enlist them or try to get them to sell with you?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let me answer the second piece and then go to the first one. The inbound, the image of phones ringing and emails coming in, I want to sell my car, very, very little. And partially because we're smaller and new, but even when I was at my prior company, it's one of the biggest players, just generally the inquiries and inbounds go lower. And what that means is more and more people have to proactively find clients and talk about it. We talked about online a little bit. There's more options now too. So it's finding the right curation of cars, convincing the sellers why this is the right one, and then delivering that result so that you have that continual relationship going forward. So very little inbounds, a lot of outbounds, a lot of, I think Ramsey puts on like 20,000 miles a year.
He's always on the
more.
road. He's always sitting in a Volvo.
His Volvo is just getting to 500,000 miles now.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. Yeah. But so you got to go see clients, you got to talk, you got to be proactive. How you differentiate, it's different. It's competitive. Most clients will call 2, 3, 4 auction houses before they make a decision.
Sure.
Some of it comes to economics and terms. Some of that comes from personal relationships. Some of that comes from how you curate the sale. Without going into all the details, we tend to have a younger team, and we tend to strategically have younger generation of cars. If you look at, maybe I'm giving too much the secret sauce, but it's all public information. But if you look at us versus other auction houses at Amelia or Monterey, which are more comparable because we're there in both with other big ones. You'll see every auction since we started, we're roughly about 8 to 12 years younger, an average age of cars. So
Okay, yeah.
year of manufacturing.
Yeah.
So, if most of them are in the 60s, we're in the 70s. If some of they're in the 50s, we're in the late 60s. So that's part of it is because our team is younger. They resonate. They know the collectors that are younger. We also think, kind of positioning for the future, right?
Yeah.
What are some tips if, let's say, a PCA member was thinking about inquiring about selling a car through a broad arrow live auction? Obviously, the live auctions are much more curated than online. If they really want to do live, what are some tips, just general things that they can do to help their chances? Or, yeah.
I wish we had that problem
Yeah.
where so many people want to sell live.
Yeah.
No, but it's a good question. It could be daunting both actually to first-time sellers and first-time buyers for live auctions. And, from an auction house perspective, you're trying to curate the most interesting group of cars. So, just make up a number. Let's say it's 100 car auction. We usually end up talking to clients and getting sort of interest, or either outbound or inbound, probably 300 to 400 cars, and we end up with 100.
Oh,
and,
wow.
And that's a combination of valuation expectations. If we believe that it'll clear the market at this price, but the client's expecting this price, that's obviously harder, and we'd rather not take ones that we don't think are going to sell. Some of it comes to economics. Some of it actually comes to duplicates. If I have 2993 turbos in a cell already, do I want to bring a third one and the fourth one?
Right.
Because that doesn't do any justice for
any of the parties.
Any of
For
the
the one
parties.
that's there,
Yeah. So duplicates end up taking out a lot. And there are some cars where we said, that's a good car, but we're working on a very interesting car here, so can you hold off a little bit? And sometimes those clients are saying, I'm not holding off and I'll go somewhere else. So, generally speaking, auction houses will look for interesting angle, low mileage, paint to sample in the Porsche world, or hey, this one has a special provenance, Michael Jordan drove it, or whatever the sort of a celebrity angle, or something that is interesting is always going to not only get the auction houses to get more excited, but ultimately auction houses are more excited about it because they know the bidders will be more excited about it. I think then it comes to who you feel most comfortable with. I actually, hard to say this, but it's difficult to differentiate look and feel and execution and auction styles, slightly all different, but at the end of the day, it's the same business model. It's I don't know how to compare it to. C2S or C4S? Right?
Yeah.
2S.
Yeah,
Very similar, but not the same.
Yeah. And it's a lot of that is personal preference and where do I feel more comfortable, and I think that's kind of how it operates in the auction world as well.
I think one of the smartest things that Hagerty did was acquired a McCall Jet Center event. He didn't go, so we got the scraps and we got to go
nice.
to the McCall.
You're welcome.
It's now rebranded Motorlux, but yes, that's
Motorlux.
it.
Now it's called Motorlux.
Yeah.
But it was a great place to showcase your auction cars in a very social setting.
Yeah.
We walked around and looked at every auction car with drink in hand and talking to other people. But I thought, man, what a great opportunity.
That worked out so well. Without necessarily having initially planned it, I think, because when Hagerty decided to acquire that event and rebrand it Motorlux, Broad Arrow wasn't in the picture at that point yet, right? So when Broad Arrow was starting and we were thinking about what do we do a venue, and then when I was talking to Hagerty and Hagerty made the investment in January of 2022, we said, well, Hagerty has this thing at the Jet Center, why don't we try to do it there? And it makes sense because you have a one-night big event that has tremendous gathering of, really, gathering of
Who's who?
people, excitement, all of that,
Yeah.
food,
Yeah.
booze, music,
Airplanes,
cars, and then the hangar, next to it, we could host our auction. And so that's sort of how it so serendipitously worked. It's worked so well and interestingly that after 2 years of it, some of our clients are saying, guys, why don't you do an auction on Wednesday night too while it's happening? And because you have all the crowd there. It's excitement. And auctions, a lot of it. It's all right, let's be honest. Auction, there's transactions happening, but a lot of it's entertainment.
It's a party.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I can sit in an auction room all day long. I don't care if it's our auction or someone else's,
Yeah.
and just watch.
yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
fun.
I like
Yeah.
watching it on TV.
Yeah,
Being live is
exactly.
even better.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So there's entertainment aspect of it. A lot of auction is about energy and momentum
Sure.
in the room, whether they're bidders or not. People are drinking, having fun, lots of talks, noise, hands go up. So we're gonna try something different this year. We just announced it actually, we just announced it this morning.
Wow.
But we're gonna do a Wednesday night for day one with the party, smaller sale. You can, given if you've been to the party, you know what the atmosphere is like. So you're going to see more cars that are curated for that environment. You're not going to see I don't think, like a pre-war American classic that night. But
Yeah.
and then we're going to do Thursday, full day. So
Full day.
yeah.
They
Now,
gave-
was
they
it-
gave-
was
they
it that
gave away
event?
cheeseburgers in a bag on the way out.
Really?
Very classy, yeah.
Did they?
Oh, you weren't?
I missed that.
Yeah.
They had a table with
The event
paper
organizer
bags.
misses out on all the good stuff. We know how that goes.
Yeah, they were giving out cheeseburgers to people leaving.
What was it?
This
That
year.
event that we learned about Radius, that you had
Yeah,
mentioned.
yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that for those that don't know.
Yeah, Radius is a membership program, and it's still, I would say, evolving. It's a bit of a prototype. It started as a smaller group of, I would say, current, existing, and prospective clients of Hagerty that have significant collections and or current insured customers. Those folks who are part of it love it, and we're trying to figure out how do we expand it and make them more available. It's a cost benefit thing, and so we're actually actively, in fact, I had a meeting this week with the team about the strategy around it. So we'll continue to refine it, but right now it's a small group of sort of, for lack of a better term, VIPs at Hagerty, if that makes sense.
And you're providing unique experiences at various venues.
Yeah, so we have a hospitality house at Pebble, for example, or, I don't know how it's going to go this year, but last year we had a separate lounge area at our auction site so that folks can, actually, when it gets really crowded, it's hard to find a seat, and they'll have, special sort of catering and things like that. So we'll continue to experiment, get feedback, and continue to refine.
Sounds like the airport lounge, version of
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Well, they
Yeah.
had that at
Car-
Motorlux.
car
They had a special area. We didn't have wristbands for that. But
You
it
got the
was-
cheeseburger,
it
but
was
you couldn't
behind-
go into that
it was
area.
It was behind a screen. We could see the people, but mosquito netting. It looked
I
like
have this
mosquito
vision
netting.
of Manny looking through the little
I was,
screen
like,
with his cheeseburger going, what are they doing over there? They're eating something better than my cheeseburger.
That looks like filet
No,
mignon.
they had very good food during the show. It was on the way out. They gave people nice cheeseburgers wrapped up in a bag.
Wow,
And you
no,
must
was a
really
nice
like those
touch.
cheeseburgers.
I
I
definitely
thought it
missed
was a nice
that.
touch. Because sometimes you don't get to eat, even though you're there,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
socializing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're when you're involved, just talking to people the whole time, you find, oh my God, I haven't eaten anything.
Yeah.
So for those people who have spent too much time socializing and not waiting in line for the food, but it was a great, I thought it was a phenomenal setup they had with the food stations and the cars
Oh,
spread
yeah.
around, and it was a large facility. So every corner you walked around, you saw more and more cars, and of course you're mingling with other car enthusiasts. So it was a good
Yeah.
night.
For those listeners who are interested, I think you literally Google Motorlux or Hagerty Motorlux, and you'll find it. And there's
That sells out
tickets.
there, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
Right now, there's, I think, I'm not trying to do our plug, but I think there is, because I just happened to see it yesterday. There's a early promotion at the moment, so to get an
This
early
comes out
discount.
July 4th weekend,
Yeah.
so it might be.
Sold out by then.
Yeah,
Could be.
just check,
Yeah.
just check.
Just
So
check. Yeah.
don't say why is he
That's
promoting
our,
this?
little,
and
that's our
it's sold out?"
disclaimer, right? That's our disclaimer. here.
But it is it was a great event when it was McCall's, and I think it's even become better now as Motorlux. But I always tell people if you're going to be in that early, then definitely. But now with the Wednesday, it's even better. So how much does having we had Makila on the podcast, and we talked a lot about community and how Hagerty's creating this community of enthusiasts. How does that work with what you do with the marketplace?
There's sort of direct and indirect ways of community. Look, a lot of the customers or clients who come to our auction venues, a lot of them are familiar faces and regulars, and they come and meet with a lot of the others, both collectors and industry participants, journalists, dealers, restoration shops. And so I think that is in a way a community, and that community actually goes from one auction venue to another, and they all kind of spend the time during that week. And it's like I said earlier, live events are people gathering. Online community is something we're trying to create. Certain platforms have done much better at that, and there's lots of forums and chats out there. But I think there's real, as you know, with PCA members, and I go to the postings and the member, the Q&As and classifieds. That's all community driven, right? And I think it's engagement and more. There's so many different communities in the car world, as you know, and I think we're just a part of that, and Hagerty's a part of that, and we try to be present or supportive. I think Hagerty has, you probably saw Hagerty logo, whether it's a sponsor of coffees and donuts or actual physical presence or something like a Radwood. I think we were close to around 2,000 events last year present.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that when PCA members go to a Broad Arrow auction with their registration, they get they get set up and they get into the room. And they're embraced and they get to that experience just because they're a PCA member. Yes,
PCA members are always welcome. This is a culmination of, I think, Vu, thank you, and our partnership with PCA. And we want to make, I guess I'm biased too, being a PCA member and a Porsche lover. But yes, always welcome. And please do let us know that you're a PCA member. And our client service team will, make sure that you're set up.
So with auctions, we think of Amelia, we think of Monterey. Of course, we had our event at One Porsche Drive in Atlanta. But recently, I saw you on stage at Air and Water.
Yeah.
And so my question to you is, are you thinking of other venues other than the traditional sort of car weeks and such, or is this it, or what's in store for us?
Now you're asking me for the secret
insider
sauce.
stuff.
Got a little
I had to ask.
So I gotta say that Airwater partnership, with the founders of Lufton and holding that auction at Orange County was an unbelievable experience.
Yeah. They did a great job.
It was great execution. It's like kind of cars and coffee, but the weirdest thing is when the gate opened at 9:00, you see a sea of people coming in. By 3:00, everyone was gone. Right?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. It was like a clockwork. And our auction finished at 3, just after 3, and I walked out. I was like, where did everyone go?
To me, I'm like, that is the attention span of California. Well, when we do our own events with the Unstock and such, as EC's like, so why is the time like so?
We don't have to worry about them hanging around.
Yeah, they're in and they got other stuff to do and they're out.
That's great, but it was perfect. I did the walk before, because we were setting up for auction and stuff, but you can't walk even the day before because all the displays are all coming in overnight in the mornings. But man, what a great execution! What a great gathering of Porsche lovers and enthusiasts and interested folks. But having an auction there was great for us because it's an experiment. It's a different. Yes, have done in my prior life and in our current life sort of Porsche sales. And there's reasons why we do Porsche sales and other sales too. And I'm happy to talk about that. But this one, the partnership with the team there, Airwater team, and we think that is something that is replicable and we can continue to build on. Obviously, so you'll see us continuing to be prominent or growing in the Porsche sort of segment or the mark. We are thinking about other geographies and other events, not just in the U.S. as well. It's one of those things where I don't know what the right analogy is, but we got to have the right team to do it. It's chicken and the egg, right?
Right.
We have to build a team to be able to pursue certain opportunities, but the opportunity has to be there for us to build the team. So spending a lot of time around that. And so you'll see us carefully, and we're not trying to be the biggest. We're not trying to be the fastest growing. We're trying to be known as one of the best qualities and most interesting, events to go to. You'll never see us, and yes, because we're not the biggest right now and we're also the youngest, but even at the wildest dream scenario for live auction world, size is not going to be our focus. It's going to be more of a experience, things that people want to go to and have a great sale.
So we're up to an hour, and I do want to thank you again for all of your support and guidance with the Classic Club Coupe. your support of PCA. And thank you for everything that you're doing in the Porsche world. With your recent sales, as you always reach out to us first, and you always ask, "What do you think about us doing this?" And would PCA like to have a role in that? Thank you for that, and I hope that we'll continue to receive those calls and emails, and know that ourselves here at PCA National Headquarters and the members love these opportunities, and it'll continue for a long time.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity and the partnership. We want to reach out to you because we love what PCA is doing. We love the members. I'm a member. A lot of people on our team are members, but we think there's a lot of collaborations we can do. And I hope that it's not just Porsche, but we can kind of replicate these types of things with the broader car community and car lovers.
Build the excitement everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so, with Hagerty and Broad Arrow, both, look forward to continuing to have a great relationship with PCA. And again, all PCA members, welcome to any of our events.
So before Vu closes out, a little hard-hitting question. How many Porsches do you own?
Oh, boy.
When we were talking off air, I felt like you were dealing like 7 cards here, and I was trying to keep track of.
Leslie, my wife, hope doesn't listen to this podcast.
They never listen.
Although I think she's seen them all. So she just doesn't know that they're actually 2 different cars. The
shuffle.
It's bad that I have to count. I have 4 993s and 4 997s. I'm
nice.
One of those guys that sort of doubles down, triples down, or quadruples down, and things that I like. They're all slightly different. So I have 2 993 C4Ss and then 2 993 turbos. They're all a little bit different. And then for 997s, I have 2 997-1s and 2 997-2s. So one is just a regular Carrera 2. One is a, I guess 1.5. I guess it's a turbo coupe, and then one's a 2.2. I have a C2S and then a GT3. So fortunate. Don't ask me how much of my assets have been going to cars versus other things, but
what's important that we know that the president of Hagerty Marketplace and Radius is a true PCA and Porsche person.
The poster child of that warning: don't get high on your own supply. I think when your employees find a Porsche at auction, they probably think, "Hey, Ken might be perfect for this."
Don't worry, if it doesn't sell, he'll buy it. All right, folks. Well, thank you for listening. If you aren't currently a PCA member and own a Porsche, grab that VIN, head over to PCA.org and get yourself a PCA membership. If you're looking for that special Porsche for your driveway or your garage, we have the test drive program. And remember to follow us on the podcast Instagram page, all the behind the scenes photos and videos, Porsche Club Insider, one word. Of course, we would love it if you give us a solid like, comment, and or subscribe on YouTube. And if you'd like a set of PCA Insider decals, just send an email to us at podcast@pca.org, and we will make sure we send you a set out. Until next time, stay safe, and we'll catch you down the road. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.